Welcome back to the podcast. This episode, we are joined by Mr. Herb Pinder Jr., owner of the Goal Group of companies, which includes G Energy, a private equity firm investing in oil and gas companies, and Goal Sports Group, which managed the contractual and financial affairs of professional hockey players for 35 years. Mr. Pinder has served on the boards of more than 50 public and private businesses, crown corporations, and nonprofit organizations, including ARC Resources, Canadian Airlines, Wascana Energy, Sunshine Ski Resort, and Viterra. Among his many accomplishments, Mr. Herb Pinder won a bronze medal playing hockey for Team Canada in the 1968 Winter Olympic Games in Grenoble, France. Mr. Pinder served a term as an honorary colonel of the 38th Service Battalion, received an honorary Doctor of Laws from the University of Saskatchewan, is an honored member of the Saskatchewan and Saskatoon Sports Hall of Fame, and is a fellow of the Institute of Corporate Directors. Mr. Pinder has served many nonprofit organizations, including Canada's Sports Hall of Fame, C.D. Howe, Manning Awards, Banff Centre for Management, YPO International, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and the Fraser Institute. Mr. Pinder graduated from the University of Saskatchewan with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, attended the University of Manitoba Faculty of Law, and earned an MBA from Harvard Business School, and is also an editorial contributor to the Western Standard. Among other things, we discuss winning Olympic medals, private equity, Western alienation, and 50 years of Saskatoon business. This podcast episode is powered by ATB Capital Markets. ATB Capital Markets provides financial solutions and strategic advisory services to help businesses thrive. With a track record of successful deal execution, ATB is a full-service investment dealer with a deep understanding and commitment to the industries it serves. Visit atbcapitalmarkets.com for more information. This podcast episode is brought to you by EVA. EVA is a next-generation analytics platform powered by McDaniel Research and tailored specifically for oil and gas to quickly derive insights that matter to energy operators, investors, and advisors. EVA is the only platform that leverages public data, your in-house operator data, and exclusive data sets interpreted by professionals at McDaniel Research. This combination allows for rapid analysis of the most complete data possible, enabling better decisions around A&D, completion design, and optimal field development. Visit turinganalytics.net to learn more about leveraging EVA to uncover hidden trends, make informed decisions, and stay ahead of the competition. Good afternoon, Mr. Herb Pinder Jr. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I'm surprised to be invited, but as you know, I think I live in Saskatoon, but I spent a lot of time in the last 30 years in Calgary, and I went through the list of some of the names, and have to say I'm quite honored to be included with that group.
Well, I'm honored to talk to you, so it's mutual. My grandpa was also named Herb, and my brother's middle name is Herb, so big fan of the name.
Well, it was never a name I really liked, and my friends call me Herbus. It's just warmer and more friendly, but Herb is my name, Herbert, I guess.
So it's a great name. There's a commonality.
Good.
You've had an interesting career. Your family owned Pinder Drugs. You won a bronze medal with Team Canada in 1968 at the Olympics. You got a law degree. You have a Harvard MBA. You were an NHL player rep. You had a private equity firm. So you've done a lot of things in your life, but maybe how would you define yourself?
I'm a little guy from a little place. That's how I define myself, and it's true. You know, any of the boards that I ended up on some big boards, but when I went on them, they were small. And I have no pretense. I chose to stay in Saskatoon, and it's a little place, and I'm a little guy in the context of things. So that's how I see myself.
Well, I thought for the purposes of today's conversation, we could structure it chronologically, more or less.
Sure.
So to begin at the start, you were born in Saskatoon, I think?
I was actually born, my father was at school, and I was born in the U.S. in Boston. But I grew up, I'm a Saskatoonian, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids, 4 boys in 5 years. my poor mother. And we were all active, and especially in sports. And I was a pretty good student and accelerated. So I graduated from high school when I was 16. And my father was a very far-sighted man. It was the role of French in our country was identified. And so he sent me off to a boys' school in Lausanne, Switzerland. So I studied in French. And actually, I think there was a second aspiration. They wanted me to grow up a bit, which I think I did a bit when I was in Switzerland. Had a great time, and came back and went to the University of Saskatchewan, studied undergrad in economics and a minor in history, and much to my surprise, made the Saskatoon Blades in the Western Hockey League. And I wasn't ready, but I made the team. So anyway, 3 years I graduated, worked construction in the summer. It was just early days of athletes training, and construction as a labor was about the best training program I could have, and even got paid for it. So when the coach didn't like me, I wasn't very committed. I didn't think I was a good enough player. I wasn't a physical player. I was a nice player, but my brother, who went on, had a long professional career, was really feisty, and he'd swing a stick at your head and not even think twice. So anyway, I got sent down, and then year 2, the coach didn't even want to sign me, but he wanted to sign my brother. And my dad said, take them both, you don't get either of them. Mm-hmm. I was afraid of the coach. He was afraid of my father. So made the team, but wasn't engaging physically. And Christmas time, a bunch of my university friends came. We had a Boxing Day game, and I got benched. I was embarrassed, and I was angry. And finally, we were losing into the game. Okay, get out there. And I ran everybody I could. And an epiphany. I found out I could. You remember this big redheaded guy from Quebecer, but playing in Melville. And I could run the guy. I couldn't. It surprised me. So anyway, we get invited. I'm finishing undergrad. I was accepted at the University of Toronto Law School. They had a really good team, the Varsity Blues. I'm headed to Toronto, but we got invited to the national team, which in those days, professionals couldn't play in the Olympics. Amateur players, and the national team had been around for 15 years. And so go to Winnipeg. To my surprise, I made the team. My brother was a shoo-in, but in my position, there were 4 incumbent centermen, and I wasn't going to make the team. And so January came, and the national team was basically based on students. And so the guys were on the team, they had papers to do, and we're going off this, month to the Olympic Games, or there were 23 of us, 18 are going. And I'm kind of resigned I'm not one of them. So we got this game in Calgary, and guys are bailing out. So I went to coach, said, Coach, why don't you put my brother and I in the same line so you can see where this is going? And they put the line together. And for the next final 3 games before the team selection, we had 16 of the team's 18 goals and none against. A headline in the sports page, these 3 worth the price of admission. So much to my surprise and everyone else, I made the team. And it was one of the great moments of my life, as you could imagine.
You had the Olympics, and ultimately you guys win the gold medal.
We won a bronze
medal.
Bronze medal. Yeah. And I got hurt. We played 2 games in Prague, and beep, beep, I moved the pass to him, and I knew it was off, so I watched it. I got hurt. So I ended up playing only 2 games, scored a goal, but I lost my spot. So it was a little bit of a disappointment from that perspective, but our goaltender, who later played for the Boston Bruins, Kenny Broderick, stood in his head, and we played exceptionally well until the final game, and we had a bad game against the Soviets. It beat us 5-0 for the gold medal. If we won, we would have won the gold medal.
So then that happens. I think you hurt yourself somewhere around there, your ankle or something, and you go back and get your law degree. What did you do next?
So, challenging year. First year law, traveled away. I call a buddy from Switzerland, another Canadian from Calgary. Let's go skiing. Mistake number one, should never, have a hockey career in front of me. And, but of course, I'm 21 years old. I'm an athlete. I couldn't get hurt. I'm a neat guy, And then the second mistake, I had 5-year out-of-date equipment. And we had to have the long thongs and bindings that didn't release properly. So the third run, I fell and nothing released. So my ankle released, smashed my ankle joint. And I had a bunch of surgeries. I've had 5 ultimately, and it's still a disability, call it what it is. But I just wasn't able to play anymore. And so I screwed up my hockey career, and I have no one to blame other than my own misjudgment.
Was your plan to play in the NHL? Was that your goal? Or?
Yeah, well, but it hadn't been. But all of a sudden, the last 2 years, I really improved my skating. I was pretty good with the puck and a good playmaker. And yeah, I think I wasn't a mean son of a bitch, but it's not something that consumes me. I just wish I had a good ankle.
So you went back to law school.
I finished law school and articled, got called to the bar, and then I put a stop payment on practicing law. And the reason for that...
So you would have been mid-20s?
I would have been 23.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't... I was at the wrong end of the phone. The people playing the game and calling law firm for support. And I have great respect for the legal fraternity. Everybody trashes lawyers till they need one. It's a great profession. They're great people, but it wasn't for me. So I came over here actually when the World Hockey Association was formed, the Outlaw League. Calgary was one of the first franchises granted. So it was a wonderful man named Bobby Brownridge. He'd been an NHL player, and my uncle, who was a hockey player, knew him. So I went and visited with him, and he hired me on the spot to be executive assistant to the president and be involved in running the hockey team. So this was, I was living the life again. I'm back in the hockey business, and I'm back in Prague at the World Tournament. This nefarious guy from Chicago, we're going to bring back some Soviets and or Czechs to play in the World Hockey Association, which ultimately happened. But Bobby Brownridge got cancer and sold the team, very sad, to a bit of a rogue, and he got uncomfortable and shut the team down. So everybody in Calgary knew I was out of a job, but I'm in Prague, and it was before cell phones. Everybody knew I was out of a job except for me. So anyway, I moved on and I made a good decision. I went to work for Gerald Knowlton. You're probably too young, but Knowlton Realty was maybe the best real estate brokerage firm in Canada, maybe in North America, commercial. And Gerald, who's still alive in his 90s, was very difficult, very demanding. Kind of reminded me of my father. And I worked my ass off 80 hours a week for $300 a month. I couldn't even get out of my apartment in the cable with, but boy, did I learn. It was just fabulous. And learned a lot about myself. I grew up a little more. And so I had applied. My father was very, very demanding, and I could go to any business school I wanted as long as it was Harvard Business School where he went.
So you were in your late 20s at this point?
I'm 25 now.
And you're thinking you got to go to business school?
I want to go to business school. Yeah. That was always the plan for me. And I had applied out of law school and got turned down. So much for the notion that if your father went, you would get a free pass into the business school. I got turned down. But a second time I applied, and this time I got in. And that was it was very demanding. You arrive and they go, whoa, everybody here's a star, and do I fit in? And you eventually find out everybody's got 2 legs and 2 arms, and it was extremely intense. It's a case method. We didn't have lectures. The professors write cases, and they hand it with, you're the decision maker. What are you going to do? And then you walk into the classroom with 800 students. I think it's 1,000 now, but 10 sections of 80. And in your section, that's who you in the first year, every class is your section. And they ask someone to tell us what you do, Trevor. And the professor would say, why? How about this? And 79 sets of eyes turn and look at you. Very intimidating. I got called the first week. Anyway, you get past that. And then second year, you get to pick what interests you. And so it was, again, one of the great experiences of my life. Really interesting people. George Bush was one of my classmates. And he was I had already started after the WHA franchise fell apart. I started getting calls from players. Herb, you remember me? I played against you, or former teammates. You're a lawyer. You've worked in the WHA. And it was early days of sports representation. Mark McCormick was IMG in Cleveland. He had Arnold Palmer. He actually sent me a letter asking me to go to work for him. I never met the guy. And there were few in hockey. So it was pretty avant-garde stuff. And I was 25 years old. But I got started, and I had a bunch of clients when I went to business school. And Bush thought he's a real sports fan. He thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
So anyway, as a side point.
So that would have been George W. Bush.
Yeah. So the first, I forget which order, one year, Bobby Orr won the scoring race. And the other year, Phil Esposito won the scoring race. Because I had clients coming through, I had tickets. I probably saw 30, maybe 40 games over 2 years while I was going to school. That was fun. So anyway, we got through, and it was, again, just these world-class professors writing books and really phenomenal. Well, the students were mixed, as you would expect, but from all over the world. And I was really grateful to have had that opportunity.
So you did your MBA at Harvard, and at the time you were thinking about becoming a player full-time?
I actually started the summer before I went to school. I had clients, I think 8 NHL players. It was early days of sports representation. The players needed to be represented, and there weren't very many doing it. So I was in Boston, I could have stayed, but I gotta say, I enjoyed it. It was making up for the hockey career that I didn't have. And it was the same age. I had fun with the players, and they needed me, and that was all very satisfying. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't something, become a big shot player agent. There's lots of celebrity too, but that's never been anything I've been interested in. I'm kind of a private guy, actually. But I did make a decision to come back and join the family business.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Conate Water Solutions. Do you need cost-effective water sourcing options to supply your next drilling or completions program? Conate Water Solutions is a specialized hydrogeology company focused on water well drilling, testing, and water management services in Western Canada and Texas. Contact info@conatewater.com or check out conatewater.com for more details. This episode is sponsored by 360 Engineering and Environmental Consulting. 360 is dedicated to shaping a better future by championing responsible development with a forward-thinking approach. As established leaders in the site closure market, 360 provides innovative solutions to address complex engineering and environmental challenges. From safeguarding communities to preserving our planet, 360 is committed to making a meaningful impact at every step. Discover the 360 vision and learn more at 360eec.com. So, what was the family business, and who is Herb Pinder Sr.?
So my grandfather grew up in Ontario. I never met him. One of my regrets, but he died before I was born. Came west because he was a pharmacist and a hockey player. And there was an opening so that he could to apprentice in this drugstore. And he played hockey for the senior team. I think he was quite entrepreneurial because eventually he ended up owning both the drugstore and the hockey team,
which was called Pinder's Drugs,
which was changed to Pinder's Drugs. And then he built quite a company, and then there was the Depression and World War II. And so my uncle, the oldest son, was a pharmacist, and he went off to war and came back. And my dad was at business school, and he went back to help out after my grandfather died and never left. So my dad, Herb, and he's Herb, I'm Junior. That was pointed out to me many times. So anyway, my dad was a really capable guy. I worshipped him, and my friends would make fun of me. You only saying that because your dad said it. That was right.
Yeah.
My role in life was to take this now third generation company and hand it over to the fourth generation in better shape. That had a lot of meaning, personal meaning in, what's my role in life.
And your dad had grown it from a relatively small pharmacy to something much bigger.
Well, by this time, my uncle and my father had built it into, I think we had 20 stores.
Right.
So it was by Saskatchewan standards, it was a significant business. And so I was quite comfortable.
So you left Harvard and went back to the family business.
Right, had my first falling out with my father's. I wanted to play some golf that summer. He said, no, get started. I said, no, I'm not ready to get started. That was our first. And anyway, he and my uncle go away for the winter and come back, and nothing was, my uncle was good, but from my father's point of view, nothing was good enough. It took me 2 years. I recruited a really strong operator from Toronto, from Shoppers Drug Mart, came out, made a big bet to come out to Saskatoon. And we worked really well together, and we were making a lot of progress. But my dad didn't want to give up control. When we did a management buyout, but we said, we're not going to do it. We're going to leave if both families sold down, and then we got a piece of the action. It was kind of a third. And it was being financed by the company because none of us had any money. And my dad breached the agreement. One day he came in and said, I made a deal with your uncle. It's done. It's over. And I think I could have legally, we had an agreement. But things weren't going well and with him. So nothing was ever good enough. And that was kind of my life with him. I did everything my father wanted, but it was never good enough. And, family businesses are, anyway. So when he said that, I just blurted out, but you're impossible to please. It wasn't a thoughtful comment, I just blurted out. And he said, you bring out the worst in me. And he got really mad at me. Well, that was a TSN turning point. That was it. I went to the guy I brought out from Toronto and said, Bill, this ain't working. You go first because we don't have enough, private company. We don't have the capital to pay us both out. So it took a while for me. But eventually, and then my father loved to fight, and he got energized him. And we had a fight over the valuation of our shares. But at this point, I just said, I'm leaving. Nothing was ever good enough. And, I didn't figure it out for decades. If nothing's ever good enough, it justifies him staying. He wanted control. That's why he bought out the other third. So he wanted control, and I wasn't prepared. By the time I left, I was 38, and my father actually died at 91. He shot his age 90 times. He was a very good athlete. So now I'm in Saskatoon. I wanted to stay because I had my cottage, but there aren't a lot of CEO jobs. So I grew my player representation business. So I grew that, and I did it on a part-time basis for 35 years. This was 10 years into it or 12 years into it. I like to work, so I'd do my drugstore business during the day, and then after supper, I was a single guy, and I had lots of energy. Also, by this time, and this became an issue with my family, I was starting to get appointed to boards. And that was something I really enjoyed. Over time, this really grew, and it's not something you can I want to be on board, so I'll knock on the door and ask. You have to be invited. In fact, it's not welcome to demand. And Trevor, I can't believe it when I actually, not so long ago, decided to count. I've been on 50 boards, 30 businesses, 20 nonprofits, and it's some really interesting, fascinating across a range of industries, from mostly energy. That was the biggest, and we'll get to that. But an airline, a ski resort, it was a Sunshine Village, a engineering firm, a financial company from Montreal. And I could go on just across a range of businesses that it was really fun. It was like Back to Business was like a case, except it's a real, you're not reading it, you're living it. So that became a really big part of my life.
So you're about 40 years old now then?
Yeah. Almost 50 years I've been on 50 boards.
Right.
I'm 78 now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm still on 2 private companies, small companies. And my favorite nonprofit is the Fraser Institute. Anyway, along the way, I was on some energy boards, and I also, I made a lot of bad decisions, but I made another good decision. I joined the Young Presidents Organization, YPO, they call it now. And just this wonderful group of people, mostly men and more women now, but men and women. And we have what's called President's Forum, a downsize, smaller group, 8, 10, 12, which you build trust. And into my forum group came Mac Van Willingen. They were hotshot investment bankers in Calgary, and I had an interaction with them. And then they evolved into investment management with private equity, and they were doing something a little different, something public instead of private. And Mac asked me, would I go on the board? The other non-management was Hal Quisley. That's when Hal and I first met. And I later asked Mac, I said, Mac, of all the people in Calgary, I had some energy background, but not like, he said, Herb, I saw curiosity. So that plugged me into ARC. And then they started doing their private.
So what year was this?
Sorry?
What year was that?
This would be 1995, maybe.
Huh.
I also, back to my hockey work, started to do financial work. Started with one of my early clients was a guy named Glenn Hanlon. He was a goaltender with the Vancouver Canucks and played on a bunch of different teams, but we really connected. And he said, getting this money he never thought he'd have. And he said, Herb, I want you to manage my money. I said, well, I don't do that, Glenn. No, Herb, I want you to manage my money. I said, okay, when do we start? So that was a part of my offering. And I really enjoyed that. It was important to them. It was challenging. And I developed a program. So I had invested in this entity that I went on with ARC. And it got sold. It was successful, but the ARC didn't like being public. They're private, kind of like I am. So I had this money, and they were doing their third fund. And I asked Mac, can I invest? And he said, you know what, we're mostly institutions, but I'll talk to my partners. And came back and said, yeah, fine. So I was going to invest with ARC Financial. Doesn't get any better.
In the 90s.
And then they got oversubscribed by 2.
Mm-hmm.
They came back and said, Herb, I said, you know what, Mac, I'm not going to hold you to what you said. I understand. And he said, good, we got a better idea. Come invest alongside us. Now, back then, there was the ARTC, the Alberta Resource Tax Credit. And you got a credit. It was to encourage investment in early stage companies. But a single owner could not own more than 50%. So they needed to get friendly investors. So I started investing alongside, and that was pretty good. And again, back to Mac. And so then I said, well, you know what? Why don't I do this? So I started a private equity firm, and very small, just individuals, not institutions and foundations and pension funds. And I didn't want to, by now I'm 55. And I'm not going to try and build a big organization. So I've done 15 funds over 20 years, just winding down the last fund, And it's been very challenging, Trevor. We had the credit crisis in 2008 and 9. Then we had the Saudis overproducing. They started on June 20th, 2014. Price of oil collapsed. Then we had COVID. So it's been a tough, and I would have to say I would be disappointed in the results in aggregate of my work. We had some really, really good funds, but we had some stinkers too. And it was the message here is commodities are volatile, and particularly oil, particularly in the last 2 decades.
So, but when did the drugstore sell? Because at some point you sold the drugstore to Shoppers.
Yeah, so I laughed, and it was amazing, just a side point, but going from this is my role in the world, my heart and soul is in the family business. Now I'm outside it. It didn't matter to me anymore. And eventually it was sold in pieces to different entities, but mostly to Shoppers. And then some years later, our wholesale was sold to a company in Edmonton. I think the family holding company still has lots of property. I eventually sold my interest in that as well. And so I'm right out of all family. And again, that was very emotional. But the benefit of hindsight here, I think they did me a favor. They unleashed my ability my opportunity to be entrepreneurial. And the things I've done, I couldn't have done if I was focused on a family business. And I would have been happy doing that, but not with my father questioning everything and never satisfied.
But for the listener, it was a successful sale. It went well.
Yeah, no, that all went well, and I didn't have an interest anymore.
And your dad, he was a member of the Order of Canada?
My father was very accomplished.
Yeah.
And he was on a lot of boards, well educated, he was smart, he was very proactive, very aggressive to a point of extreme. And to the point of, I think, in the end, the business was more important to him than his son was. He wanted the business and let his son go. And you know what? He never forgave me. We had a fight over valuation, and it was totally unnecessary and silly, but I wasn't going to get pushed around. And we had a evaluation and a dispute about that. And I guess I was seen to maybe be the winner of that. The truth is we all lost. We were all losers. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter anymore, but at the time it was my father never showed any interest in anything I ever did after that. Lived a long time, and my brothers and I are estranged. We don't, 4 boys in 5 years. We had a lot of fun together, and so that was I did my best to reconcile, but there was no interest on their part. So in the scheme of things, I come over to Calgary, which I did for 30 years, like every week or every second week. There are all kinds of people I'd rather spend time with than with my brothers. So it was a gift. It was not something I wanted or I was happy about at the time, but this all worked out really well for me.
What was you had G Energy, and then what was the Goal group of companies?
It was just a brand name underneath which I conducted all my activities. And there was another activity. Our family bought the Regina Pats hockey team. And right at the time we're having this conflict. And so after 5 years, everybody in the family, except for me, sold. And I reconstituted the group. And so we actually, I'm quite proud of this. Our team won 40 or more games, 7 years in a row, never before done in the Canadian Hockey League, in the CHL. Several teams have done it since. We had a really good team. But the Exhibition Association They're a really good guy. And I said, I'm going to reconstitute this, but we need to have a lease renewal. And we agreed on everything. And then he got hired and went to the exhibition in Edmonton. Well, the new guy, I don't know why he didn't had it in for me, but he did. And they put up a fence, barbed wire fence with only 2 entrances and charged $1 parking charge. Our tenants fell in half. Seems strange, but that's lots of land in Regina. And then the theme became, well, your marketing, our marketing's the same. This made you a lot of money. You've got all the concessions. We'll get into petty stuff. Finally, I got some public relations advice and I had a press conference and I walked through. This is everything I've done. And the tide turned, and to some extent. By this time, I'm saying, this isn't viable. I'm going to sell the team to another city. And eventually I did, to Swift Current. But this is the biggest story in the province, and I was the bad guy. And anyway, my partners this was very stressful. My partner said, Herb, you got to get out of this. So the league turned down the sale to Swift Current. Meantime, I made a deal with Billy Hickey, a former Montreal Canadian hockey player who had a sports store, and sold it to him agreed to sell it to him before I even, so the league bought it from me. But over the years, Trevor, I was writing to my investors. They're giving me their money. I thought the least I can do is tell them what I'm doing and why. So I would write, and I'd talk, once a year, I'd talk about economics, the global and Canadian economy and prospects for oil, natural gas. And I started getting, do you mind if I share these? So anyway, long story short, I ended up almost 30 months ago starting to write for the Western Standard. And it's, as you know, a digital publication that exists to protect the interests of Western Canada, which is right up my alley. So I've probably done 50 columns. Maybe it's 40. I don't know. I didn't count it. But I've been really, almost all my boards are gone. My funds are almost on down. You got to have a reason to get up in the morning. And this has become my purpose now. And I just really enjoy it. I have to go and study something and then write cogently. And then what's happening is my circulation list has grown. I'm able to, the Western Standard doesn't mind if I take the columns and circulate them. And then I get these comments back. So I learn, it's another learning. I'd love to learn, and I learn a lot because you have to write accurately and well. So
this podcast episode is powered by Broadbill Energy, the local midstream company that puts producers first. Broadbill Energy does things differently and doesn't just move energy. They are moving the industry forward. While others take a cut, Broadbill shares profits back with their customers because when Broadbill customers win, so does Broadbill. With a producer-focused approach, Broadbill specializes in the gathering, processing, and transportation of oil and gas, ensuring safety, reliability, and maximum value for the people who actually produce the energy. If you're tired of the same old midstream model and want a partner that works for you, it's time to talk to Broadbill. Visit broadbillenergy.com to learn more. And so that kind of brings us to nowadays, I guess, maybe some current events. Politics. Have you seen a shift in the country, a slide towards socialism the last, say, 9 years? Have you noticed that?
I think a slide is understated. It's been very, very disconcerting to have a bunch of ideologues, none of whom have any business background. And what has emerged again, I well remember the National Energy Program. We had opened 6 stores in Calgary, and all of a sudden, Calgary's in the dumpster and Saskatchewan wasn't far behind. So this is a second attack. Not only the incompetent, but they set out to kill the energy that not just drives the economy of Western Canada, but the whole country in a lot of respects. The single biggest importer of dollars, protects our currency, and look what's happened to it. It's been shameful, and I liken it to the fires in LA. The shrubbery that was growing for years, and it took a hot wind and a spark, and look what happened. And I think that's not a bad construct to consider here in Western Canada. I'm a proud Canadian, I have an Olympic medal, and I want to see Canada work. But the Laurentian elite that I write about quite frequently, it's the unholy alliance between the Liberal Party, Quebec, which supports the Liberal Party, and the elites in Ontario that run the country. And they got the Globe and Mail and other newspapers. They got their support. And, it goes back to Keith Davies' famous comment. This would be during the Trudeau years. Screw the West, we'll get the rest. And decades later, screw the West, we'll get the West. Except they're so incompetent that that's not good enough. But Bush, we got a 50th anniversary of Harvard Business School coming up this June. The reunion committee, and it's all about fundraising for the school, got Bush to invite the class to Dallas, where he lives. And so my wife, Madeline, and I went, and we toured his library, had a lunch, then Bush spoke. He was hilarious. He is so funny. But he was also lucid and serious as he went through his remarks for 45 minutes. He made the comment, 2008 and 2009, the first thing he says, I'm the only president in the history of the Republic who has an MBA. He said, I was very grateful for my education when this happened. And the second comment he made is, I wasn't going to do anything for Wall Street. They created the problem. He said, but his theme was, we're going through a tough time now, but we'll get through it. He said, we got through it in 2008 because our institutions held. And I can't get that thought out of my head. And there's going to be a column there. Our institutions in Canada aren't going to hold. If the Laurentian elite's an institution, and in a way it is, our House of Commons, yes, is the British parliamentary system, but it's one of the great things in the history of the world. From the Magna Carta in 1215, and we adopted it holus bolus. But the difference is Great Britain is a unitary state. We're a federal state. So, as we all know in the West, often elections are over before the Manitoba border. So the House of Commons is an important part of democracy, but it's not enough. We don't have a democracy here for Westerners. We have a Senate that's a joke. A federal state, and don't have to look very far south, has a Senate that has a meaningful role. And it's a funny thing right now we're going through Trump. I don't want to join the U.S., the 51st state, whatever. But it is a fact that if we were a part of the United States, make it Saskatchewan, Alberta, or the whole country, or make it Saskatchewan, Alberta, to make my point, we would have more say in Washington than we have in Ottawa. 2 seats, regardless of size. And so little Rhode Island gets the same say that California with 40 million people has. And the Constitution of the U.S. is a thing of beauty. And the framers of it, in some respects, it's been said, they designed it so government wouldn't work. You have this process to go through. And our country's history is different. But we came into Confederation in 1905, and they separated Saskatchewan and Alberta as they thought it might be too powerful together. This is one of my messages. I think Danielle Smith is fabulous. Been a couple of smaller meetings with her and watch her. She's incredible. But we need to have more coordination between Alberta and Saskatchewan. We have a very good premier as well. And what that does is it doesn't allow Eastern Canadians, Central Canadians to demonize Alberta, isolate and demonate. No, it's not Alberta. It's Saskatchewan and Alberta. And I think 1 + 1 is more than 2 in this framing that I'm doing. So anyway, I know better as a member of the bar for 50 years to criticize the judiciary, but Quebec and Ontario have composed the vast majority of the Supreme Court. And Trevor, you know this, we're all creatures of our family upbringing, the schools we went to, the community we grew up in, the culture and when we have a different culture than Central Canada. And in fact, Central Canada has different cultures. Quebec is a nation and moving that way structurally. So when the Supreme Court, I'm not impinging their integrity, but they come from a different background and we're underrepresented. So we've got a House of Commons where we have really no say. We have no Senate. We have a Supreme Court that's got a different background, call it, from a different culture. And the way we are, we will never be able to have a fulfilling economic and political existence within Canada as it's structured. And so a lot of my writing is meant for Central Canada. Please understand, go back to Preston Manning. The West wants in. We want to be part of our country, but that's failing. And for a second time, this time, Trudeau, number one, just confiscated revenues and pushed the industry out of Alberta. Number two, wants to kill our livelihood. And this whole net zero is falling apart. It was never sensible. Oil usage keeps growing. So does coal. And natural gas we have incredible opportunity here. So I think if our country, if it doesn't work, it's a failure for all of us. But imagine that premiers in two provinces have passed legislation, Saskatchewan First and the Sovereignty Act, trying to reinforce the powers of our provinces. That is unbelievable in the context of a federal state. Could you imagine that happening in the U.S.? And whether or not the legality and how they stand up over time, it's important, back to George Bush, it's important we have strong institutions here in the West. Those acts will help. And it's why I'm writing for the Western Standard.
Well, that's politics. I mean, we could talk for hours, but today we'll kind of wrap up with some advice, if that works. But first, favorite time in your career thus far?
Oh, boy. Had so much fun representing players and had so many good relationships and making a difference to these young men. The board work is fun, again, because it matters. Shareholders are depending on you. My best board experience was ARC Resources, really a fabulous company and tremendous people. And this reflects back Van Willigen when we had the Pats and we're winning games and more than any other team in the country. That was fun. But I got to tell you, my best decision, Trevor, when I was probably in my 30s, I found that at this grocery store in Saskatoon, I could buy my Sunripe apple juice by the case and get a discount. I learned if I showed up on a Thursday night or Saturday, there was this incredible smile at the checkout and these eyes and this face. It sounds so hokey, but it moved me. Anyway, 10 years later, I bumped into her at a workout place and asked her out, and nope, she was tied up. A year later, and finally got a date, and it was just meant to be. And so at the age of 43, and I was loving being a bachelor. I could work as hard as I wanted. I could play. And the freedom was great. But I can't imagine not being married and not being married to Madeline. We have two children. Scott is 33. He did a master's they both played golf at American colleges. From there, he went to the University of Melbourne and got a physio degree and has a practice in Kelowna. Married a woman he went to school with who's master's in environmental studies, and she's runs water out of Vernon. And we have a granddaughter. And Trevor, I used to say under my breath when people babble away about the grandchildren, yeah, they're making them every day, like give it a rest. But when I got handled that bundle, I was astounded by the emotion so I just came from there today, and we got another grandchild on the way. And I'm not religious, but I think God has given old people grandchildren to make us happy in our dotage. And our daughter, University of Richmond, did her CFA, Berkeley MBA, married a classmate from Chile, and was working in San Fran for Visa. So I made some, and Madeline's been a phenomenal mother, and I've learned an awful lot from her. Didn't come from a family that was loving. I've learned to be loving. That has been unleashed as well, thanks to Madeline.
One of the best decisions you made to get married.
By far.
You could have left Saskatoon, but you decided to stay. Why did you stay?
That's a really good question, and I've asked myself a lot. I've been asked that a lot over the years. Not recently, but why'd you stay in Saskatoon? I just like it. It's the right size. It's a couple hours to favorite place is our cottage at the lake. I got talk about institutions. I got involved at the golf course, and I was on the board, and I was the president, and a lot of other things in the city, and a lot of friends. And just the last 30 years, I have to say, I've been more Calgary-centric, here every week or two until the last few years. And but it's home.
Maybe to wrap up, advice to a 30-year-old Herb Pinder. What would you tell him?
I think one of the big things, and this would be both Mac Van Willingen and Hal Quisley, is humility. I was far too full of myself to go skiing. That was a really dumb decision. And I lacked humility to think I could make the family business work. And I brought in somebody as a partner in the sports business. And early on, he told me he didn't believe in guilt. And he wanted to have a different name. And what a surprise. I spent a couple $1 million to fund a competitor in the sports agency business. So it's good to have self-confidence, good to believe in yourself. But humility is an awfully important aspect of having a successful business career and a happy life. And I'm very humbled by and grateful for my wife. Another word is gratitude. We every day we remind ourselves how grateful we are to have the life that we live, to have each other, have good children and good son-in-law and daughter-in-law. You have no say about that. And have had some financial success. That's not an issue. So a lot of gratitude that almost is stronger than the need for us in Western Canada to stand up for ourselves. That's even stronger.
I think that may be a good place to leave it. I really appreciate your time today. So thank you.
Thank you again. I'm honored, and it's been a lot of fun to go through all this again.
Hello, listeners out there. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Hopefully the episode provided some insights. If you enjoyed the show, check out trose.ca where more episodes are yet to come. You can also subscribe to the podcast where your token of support is much appreciated. Until next time, happy coffee drinking.